This one's going to be a little bit of a weird one. It's going to be a little layered. Yes, it is mainly about the quote, "Not all those who wander are lost." But before I start dissecting that and talking about it and ranting about it and all my magical feelings about it, we have to talk about where it came from, because it is incredibly relevant as to why I really dislike it. So, I'll let you ask yourself right now, what is the literary source that you think of when you hear that quote, "Not all who wander are lost"? If you just hear it, no pictures, no images, nothing, if someone were to say it out loud, what do you think of? Okay, I'm hoping you have an answer in mind, because we're going to prove you right or prove you wrong on this right now. I often see that quote all too much on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Every time that I've seen it, it has always been attributed to Alice in Wonderland or Lewis Carroll, who wrote Alice in Wonderland, but mostly it is attributed to a conversation with the Cheshire Cat that Alice is having in the book. So many times I see it as like a really, I just call a basic quote, like a basic meme quote that's supposed to be like faux inspirational, motivational, and we're going to get into that whole thing as to why I think that's stupid. But it's usually there, and then there's like a picture of like Alice who's like talking to the Cheshire Cat, or just walking down a path by herself, or it's all like cursive writing, and there's like some woods or something. Like it's anytime it's accompanied by a picture of a character, I've always seen it be Alice in Wonderland. I've seen this as tattoos before that have like little butterflies and stuff around them, which I attribute those illustrations to Alice in Wonderland, because, I mean, whether it be the Disney movie or other stuff, like in some of the books that have illustrations, there are certain things where there's butterflies and whatever else around her. So I definitely would attribute it more to Alice in Wonderland than I would its original source, which is Tolkien's Fellowship of the Ring, Lord of the Rings series, Book 1, if we're not counting The Hobbit. But anyway, here's the thing. I have this book in my hand, which means I own it. Like, I mean, I'm at my house, and I have The Hobbit and I have the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I've never read them. Actually, I tried to watch Fellowship of the Ring in theaters when it first came out. I was in high school, and I fell asleep. I don't know why, just because it was long, because it was calm, because I had a rough day, I don't know, but I fell asleep, so I never felt like watching any of them ever again. And part of me always wants to read something before I watch it anyway, and this is one of those instances where I know this is a book before the movie, right? Eventually, I watched all the movies. I enjoyed them. They weren't like super crazy and magical. I still do intend to read the book. Now, had I read the book, though, or if I paid attention in the movie during a certain conversation, there is a poem. And that line comes from that poem. And I'm going to recite it here in a second. I will not recite it like I memorized it, but I'm going to read it off of my notes here. But like I said, it's always, every time I've seen it, it's Alice in Wonderland related. If it's related to anything, it's someone has related it back to Alice in Wonderland. I read Alice in Wonderland once. I was like reading it out loud, and just like, I don't know, I wasn't reading it for pleasure necessarily. So that's something that I was like, I could easily have missed that if it was in there. It's one line, and I've seen it all the time. But part of me was recalling, and I was like, you know what, I don't recall it being in there. I could easily have missed it, but I was like, I'm really curious now. I'm really curious where that comes from. Because, I mean, there's a store in downtown Lethbridge, which is part of this thumbnail here, that has popped up recently, and it has that quote written in cursive, and it's yellow, and I associate, baby blue and white, and also yellow, and then pink, like pastel colors, like with Alice in Wonderland, because in many of the illustrations and graphics and whatever, definitely the baby, what is it, a pinafore? I don't know what the kind of dress is called, with like the white apron type thing going on, and like whatever. But also for some reason I see a lot of yellow and pink in my mind. I think of Alice in Wonderland. Probably yellow because of her blonde hair from the movie, from the Disney movie, the original one. Anyway, so I was thinking, like, before I found, like, this is how I found out that it is not, she, It doesn't originate from that story. It is not supposed to be. It doesn't come from Alice in Wonderland, just straight up. It just doesn't. If I just search the quote in Google, I did the work for you. I actually did some research on this one, so, you know, yeah. I never do that. So, if you search it in Google, and just the quote, and you don't put anything else in there, everything that comes up in the first, I don't even know, 20 search, results is all Tolkien, is all the poem, and a quote page that's like all these quotes from Lord of the Rings or whatever. It all goes back to him and Lord of the Rings, as it should. But if you type in the quote with Alice in Wonderland attached to it, you get a wealth of all these like basic memes, basic like faux inspirational, motivational quotes in cursive with like images of Alice in Wonderland or this, that, and the other thing. Like I said, I've seen tattoos of it before. Like, it's not something I made up. Like, it's just something that was so out there all the time, at least for whatever reason in my world, that I see it on social media often enough, part of the zeitgeist and the culture, that I just always attributed it to Alice in Wonderland too. It wasn't something that I cared to research, because I'm like, oh, it's so obvious that it's them. I mean, it's like, the song Don't Worry, Be Happy is not Bob Marley. It just happens to be a dude that sounds really like Bob Marley. And from my recollection, the song came out after Bob Marley had died already, after numerous years, and it wasn't like, oh yeah, we saved this one. Like, no, it's a completely different dude, right? But everyone was like, attributes it to Bob Marley, so you just think it's Bob Marley until you do some research. Here's the thing, and I'm just going to excuse myself from this and at the same time absolve everyone else, is that you can't just do research on every single thing. It's like, you can't just question, hey, I heard this quote, and my whole life I've heard that it was Einstein. Like, let's just say E equals MC squared. Let's just say it's not even a quote. It's like, oh yeah, the formula was Einstein. Everyone's been saying that my whole life. I see it in pictures. Again, I see it in, movies, references, whatever. So I just assume it's the truth because everyone says it. Is that a good way to be? No. But at the same time, I can't just question every single line or quote or formula or everything that's been attributed to someone and be like, is that them? Unless I have reason to believe it's them, then, then I mean, if I have reason to believe it's not them, then why would I spend the time researching it? Like, I had no reason to believe that it wasn't attributed to him, so I never did the research. I haven't done the research on that now. I mean, it's pointless. Like, right? Even after I know this Alice in Wonderland thing. Now, albeit, I think Einstein's thing maybe has further reach than Alice in Wonderland, or this quote, period. Like, not all those, I don't know, but I see this more than I see E equals MC squared. It doesn't matter. So, I wanted to look up the quote just to, like, see exactly the context, and that's when I couldn't find it. I was like, what do you mean Tolkien? What are you talking about? And I was like, what? So it wasn't even intended immediately as researching, like, where did this come from? I had no reason to question its origins. I just wanted to know the origins before I talked about it. So then it became this very layered conversation I'm having now, because originally I just wanted to talk about how stupid it is. Like, the thing is that in the context, like, I have nothing against Alice in Wonderland objectively. But it's kind of like, first of all, I'm not super into Alice in Wonderland. Like, oh, it's like one of my favorite books. It's never going to be in my top 100 books even. Like, it's just not a thing for me that I'm, like, really into. I like when people, I like what people do with it when it comes down to remix culture and, like, repurposing the story and mixing in, different realities and making it darker, like Grimm Fairy Tales comics with Alice in Wonderland. I'm really into those. Like, playing with psychological aspects and going dark with it. I really enjoy that. I really enjoy how people can play with it. I enjoy seeing it as a theater production. Like, I thought that was really cool how people can, it can be really visually stunning. You can do so much with it if you're going to play with the story that's already there and retell it and reimagine it. I like that. As for the book itself, it wasn't that magical for me, but again, the context, I saw it as a Disney movie first before ever reading the book, whatever. The other thing is that it's like having a favorite band, and again, this is not my favorite book, not even close, but it's like having a band you really like, but all their fans are just douchebags. Like, all their fans are idiots, or they're racist, or they're this, or they're that. They found something in the music that they're somehow really into, and you're like, hey, well, you just ruined, like it's really hard for me to say out loud now that I'm a fan, because they're going to associate me with you, because you are the loudest, like, fan base that gets seen, like, what, so I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to be lumped into that. Not at all. And again, this is not me being a fan of the book, but it's also just like the crowd that seems to love this book so much. Unfortunately, when I see it referenced this way, it's usually by really, really basic people. Really basic people that are using that quote specifically even as just an excuse to not know what the heck they want to do in life. And that's my immediate thought as soon as I hear it, is basic. Boom, that's the first word. And I'm very adverse to that type of thing. So that's just immediately what comes to mind is basic, idiot, stupid, like, miss me with that, like, get out of here, I don't really care about anything else you have to say or whatever. It's just where my mind goes. Like I said, immediately, that's where it goes. Again, that's just, it's like if there's a definition of a word and that's common use, maybe the definition is slightly strayed from what people use it as, but it's common use, and that's what we think of it as all the time. That, like, it takes on a life of its own. I feel like the fact, and again, this is in my mind, other people in different circles who maybe aren't on social media or aren't, getting the same things fed to them in their newsfeed because of algorithms or whatever, I don't know. Maybe they don't see that, or maybe they've known it was Tolkien since they were 10, and like they every time the Alice in Wonderland thing came up, if it ever came up a lot or a little, they just knew that was dumb, and so they never formulated this association that I have, which is, again, most times I see that quote, it's this thing that I just I'm not into, right? So, again, this is why it becomes a very layered thing, because part of this conversation is just about, man, like, I have to absolve myself from, like, not because I can't be wrong, but it's like, how do you just look up every single thing? Like, how do you look up every line, everything that you're ever told, if you have no reason to believe that it may be incorrect, or you don't want to dive into the details of it and get into the, like, whatever. I just wanted to know the origins of it because I wanted to talk about how stupid it was. And then I learned, hey, man, this has completely been misattributed forever. For so many people do it on a daily basis that I see it, and then I become part of that wave that misattributes it too. And so, I'm going to tell you right now, here, I'm going to read both passages. One, the one from Lord of the Rings where it's actually from, and the other one where it is attributed to is a very specific scene in Alice in Wonderland, and I've seen this time and time again. So first off, it is from a poem that is in Lord of the Rings. Here. The line is taken from the poem All That Glitters Is Not Gold in Lord of the Rings. It is the riddle of the Strider or Aragorn. All that is gold does not glitter, not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither, deep roots are not reached by the frost. From the ashes a fire shall be woken, a light from the shadows shall spring. Renewed shall be blade that was broken, the crownless again shall be king. Yeah, so somebody had some more notes here. Like, I honestly don't know where, I don't remember anything about Lord of the Rings other than, like, the very, like, what happens, like, the hey, yeah, it's about this thing and that thing, like, a 30-second thing is all I remember, and it's the main kind of points. So someone said, if you ask me, it is an intriguing poem, although it talks about Aragorn, the righteous heir of Gondor. It really captures how some are wandering, but they will find their path again and head towards a promising future. You may be in a difficult place in life right now, but you will have a great blah, 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 whatever. So, in Alice in Wonderland, the way that I've always seen it, if I was like, where did it come from exactly? Because I've heard this, that, and the other thing. Like, I thought it came from this conversation with the Cheshire Cat, but I wasn't sure, so this is what I found. And I'll tell you my research methods kind of in a bit here. But, so someone, this is, I'm just quoting someone right now, but, this whole idea, or whatever, I've seen this attributed to this spot in the book many times. So Alice is talking to the Cheshire Cat. This is Alice. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? The Cheshire Cat. That depends a good deal on where you want to go. Alice. I don't much care where. The Cheshire Cat. Then it doesn't matter much which way you go. Alice. So long as I get somewhere. The Cheshire Cat. Oh, you're sure to do that, if only you walk long enough. this person says, I think the two are mixed because where the quote is a prophecy about a return of the king from an apparent wandering, the Alice imagery recalls this quote, where for being aimless, Alice cannot be lost. Two different ideas that on the face seem the same. So the other thing is that once I realized, like, hold on a second, there's a question here as to where the origins are, I really was curious as to what came out first. Because I don't think that line is so crazy original that it would be immediately plagiarism, just that one line. I'm like, it's possible that people had a line that was really similar to that. And I mean, that's the thing, like, you could say, like, okay, well, Shakespeare came before Tolkien, and that whole thing about, like, all that glitters isn't gold, whatever, like, that's been remixed, reused, reappropriated, whatever, so many times. But I mean, like, apparently, from my research, and it wasn't very deep in this sense, this was attributed to, this is a Shakespeare original, right? And I mean, Tolkien uses that line, so why not use something from someone else? Well, Lewis Carroll had this thing written decades before Tolkien wrote Fellowship of the Ring, so I was like, oh, maybe he referenced it from there. It's just not in the book. Like, I reached out, so I did a bunch of research on my own, and I could not find the exact place. If you go and just Google, or use any search engine you'd like, the quote and Alice in Wonderland, it will get a bunch, like I said, a bunch of, like, memes, a bunch of, like, faux inspirational pictures, but you also get lists of, like, best quotes from Alice in Wonderland. A bunch of different sites have these lists. Every time that it's on the list, it is one line. It is not a part of a conversation, because that conversation never happened. So, yeah, I mean, I thought that would be enough, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to reach out to Reddit, and then I did. I put it on 4 different subreddits. One of them really, really took off. One of the posts did. It was in r/books, and, like, many people, and I put it in an Alice in Wonderland subreddit. I put it in quotes, and then somewhere else that I can't remember now, but there were 4. And, every response, there was no one that said, because my specific question was like, yo, I know this is from Lord of the Rings. I know that, like, that Tolkien uses it in this poem, but also I've seen it attributed to Alice in Wonderland all the time, but can someone point out to me exactly where it is in the book? Because I can't find that. And nobody came with that information. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people who saw it. There was, many comments. Many people read it. Many people responded with the same thing of it being Tolkien. I've never seen it attributed to Alice in Wonderland. In some cases, many people said that. I was like, okay, that doesn't matter. But, like, the things that... And nobody came forth, like, even from the r/Alice in Wonderland, and said, yeah, here it is. Here it is. It's from this passage. It's from this part of the book. So I understand why people can attribute it to that conversation with the Cheshire Cat, because it's in that same spirit. But that's not it. Like, so when it's everywhere, and I see it, and I immediately think, like, ugh, just, like, I don't know. It's kind of like, this is gonna miss some people probably because it's a generational thing. But it's like, if you see a girl with a Tinkerbell tattoo, or like a Tinkerbell decal on her, Jeep or something, you have a certain idea of what that girl might be like. And I only say girl because the overwhelming amount of time, I mean, it's always been a woman. So, the same thing, I feel like the kind of person that uses this quote without, or like just reshares it or whatever, again, in this faux inspirational meme type basic image, it's usually a certain, to me, it signifies this is probably this type of person. And I stereotype and I go along with that. I'm like, yep, of course, that's the type of person you are, whatever. And again, I'm really adverse to just that type of thing. The fact that they're using it wrong makes it even worse. Like, I don't use this quote. I've never used that. I've read that source material and I never found it in there. And even if I did find it in there, it wouldn't be a thing that I would enjoy. So, in the context of the poem for Lord of the Rings, it doesn't make me feel gross and yucky. It doesn't make me feel adverse and just like, oh, like, I don't like that. It makes sense for the context of the poem. When it's attributed, let's say that the Cheshire Cat actually said it in that context, in that conversation, it would just be kind of silly, it wouldn't really be whatever. But the audience that reshares it and, falsely perpetuates the source being Alice in Wonderland, that adds meaning. That adds all this other meaning too, because of the type of people that do that and what they are trying to say. And like I mentioned already, usually people are just trying to excuse the fact that they don't know what they're doing. And I think if you just, like... So, and now I want to talk about the actual quote within that context. Like, I kind of came up with all this other layered stuff up to now, but like, not all who wander are lost. Well, in this case with Alice in Wonderland, she was lost, okay? Alice was lost. She didn't know what the hell was going on. Everything is crazy. She doesn't know what, in some cases she's downright scared and terrified. Like, she doesn't know what the hell's going on. She's completely lost, and she's not okay with it. Like, for the majority of, this, she's not okay with it. She wants to go home. Like, she's not, like... it takes her a while to enjoy the journey, but, like, she is legitimately lost. It's... Yeah. If you purposefully go out and, you know what, I'm going to go backpacking across Europe, or wherever I end up, that's where I end up. Hey, I'm a rambling man. You know what? I'm just and if you don't know the context of rambling is, like, just being, like, a hobo basically and hiking everywhere. It's basically like hiking just to get around. Walking is a big thing in Europe and Ireland and a bunch of whatever, like certain places in Europe, specifically UK places, rambling was a thing, and then cutting across people's property lines, that's a whole other thing that you can research. But anyway, it's just like, yeah, that if you're just wandering on purpose, then I feel like that quote makes sense. Like, hey, like, I'm wandering, it doesn't mean I'm lost. Like, this is part of my journey. It's very purposefully part of my journey. I'm very specifically placing myself in a scenario where I don't know where I am. I got my gear, I'm going to camp, I'm going to try to survive off the land. Like, whatever it is, that makes sense. That makes complete sense. That's, but that's not how it's used. Like, it's always just like, no, I don't really know what I'm doing with my life, but hey, like, not all who wander are lost. Like, no, that's, ugh. It just makes me feel all sorts of not good. Yeah, I just, again, I had way more to say about the quote initially, I thought, than before I found out that that wasn't the source material. So like I said, it makes it doubly as bad when people are using it and using it and using it and using it and don't know where it came from. I've tried to absolve that a little bit for people, not intentionally, but only because I had to absolve myself. I've never used it, I've only reacted to it, which in some ways is kind of using it, but now I can react to it in a different way, because now I can ask people, like, hey, and I made the call out to like my Instagram and stuff too, being like, hey, what literary source do you attribute this to? I didn't share the responses, but there was at least one person so far who was like, yeah, Fellowship of the Ring, Tolkien, and I was like, oh, okay, like, I didn't respond to them yet, but yeah, and others said other stuff, so, like I said, it makes it even worse, but it's just, no matter what, it's, I don't know, I feel... This is the second time I feel like I'm just, like, ranting about how, I don't know, taking, like, a source and kind of taking apart, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm going into a circle, and I feel like, I don't know how many times, I don't, but, okay, restart. So, yeah, I don't know, I feel like that quote, in the context I've always heard it in up until now, the context that it's used in, I would say the majority of the time, by certain types of people that are trying to excuse themselves from not knowing what's up, like, not knowing what they're doing in life, whatever. Like, first of all, like, I don't know, the whole thing, it doesn't matter what quote they would have used. It's like, why would you use something else to just excuse the fact, like, to make yourself feel better about the fact that you don't know what's going on? Like, if you are okay with not knowing what's going on, you probably wouldn't need to use that quote. You probably wouldn't feel the need to express, hey, everybody, Alice in Wonderland said this, so, like, yeah, it's okay. Like, I'm in that box. Like, relates. Like, hashtag, relatable. I don't think you'd feel the need to do that if you were really secure about, hey, this is part of my journey right now, and I'm just coasting, and you know what? Like, that's what I'm doing with my life. It's what I'm doing on purpose, or you've accepted the fact that that's where you are, and, like, no, I think this is usually, again, used by people who don't know what's going on. They are trying to be okay with it by pretending on the surface to everyone else to be okay with it. It's almost just like, yeah, if you see me, passed out drunk in a ditch, hey, that's just part of my journey, man. Like, you know what? Like, not all who wander are lost. So yeah, like I don't want to say it's an excuse for poor behavior or bad behavior. It's not necessarily bad. It's just like it seems to be just like an excuse and a blanket quote that's supposed to be, again, faux inspirational, for not having your stuff together. Basically, that's where I'm going to end that. Like I said, I actually did some research into something for once, and then it took me even more off course than keeping me on course, which is not how that's supposed to work. But guess what? None of this is how it's supposed to work. This is just what I do. So with that, see you on another time.